me know when I'm go.
You are ready to go.
Okay. I will call this meeting to order at 6:31 p.m. and we'll start with roll call attendance. Ron?
Ron, present.
Sarah Best?
Sarah Best, present.
Margaret?
Margaret, present.
And Hall, present. All right. First item is approval of the minutes, but I dropped the ball on this. We actually have some July minutes and also last month's, but they are not available. So we'll do that next month. I did not receive any public comment. So now we're up to you, Mike, superintendent's update.
Sure. And I'll probably defer a lot of this to Mickey, who's got more to say, but, just really, really pleased this year when I've been at Pelham School and I was there today. Granted, it was after the kids had left, so it was parent conferences. So people were on their screens, connecting with families, but just, I think we had most kids back last year, but now we have more kids, not just because all kids are back, there's no remote option, but also because the school has more students in it, because we got a lot more school choice. It's incredibly calm. I know that's just an anecdotal kind of phrase, but it's the staff are doing a fabulous job, with students. And, there is some movement, of course, to specials, other areas. I also have seen the art room set up, and I happen to be there. It's not usually a day that I'm at Pelham, but one day, Principal Darling, and my schedule got all mixed up, and I ended up there that there was art there that day, and the art teacher's really using the space really well. There's still a lot of outdoor instruction going on across the board, but I just thought that was, noteworthy that, just we're using the spaces differently, and I think better. The gym is more naturally a gym. It's not as much a multi-use space, and I think that's been a really good thing for our students. And I think just creative uses of outdoor space. Pelham was the first school, and some of my other ones have followed suit with under the big tent moving some of the tables that would used to be in the cafeteria outside, and just really creative use of indoor and outdoor space. And I think during these times of COVID, one of the, potential silver linings is we're thinking differently about where instruction happens and how we're using space. And I think the staff at Pelham are doing an outstanding job of that. So that's my sort of core update. But if it's okay with the chair, I'll pass it over to Principal Darling, who can share more details about things going on in Pelham.
Yeah, that's any questions for Mike before we move to Mickey. Okay, Mickey, you're up.
Okay. Like Mike said, it does feel fairly calm here, within the normal range. And I'm really enjoying being the principal, I'll be honest, and walking around and spending time with the younger kids that I haven't had the opportunity in my, I don't know how many years in education. The kindergartners are so sweet. They see me in the hallway and they grab me and hug me. I call it a quick hug because of COVID, quick hug. And it's just been really great. And I've loved walking around. The fifth graders are doing a terrarium with recycled liter bottles, which is super cool. So there's fish and crickets and chaos, which is awesome. They're learning so much just from that one little project. The kindergartners are doing these identity posters in the gym. So these huge sheets of paper, and the kids lie down on it and somebody traces them, and then they put all these other pictures that kind of they self-identify with. I guess that's sort of like the general gist of it. So they start to learn about themselves and their identity. I was walking around and there was a bunch of teachers working with leaves and art projects. So I've really encouraged our teachers to do more art and just kind of calm, go outside, recess, to just kind of regroup, because we are seeing, a few kids that are stressed out. And so we're trying to help them through the stress. In the third grade, I saw them kind of doing role plays and learning how to apologize and do a really good apology and when to do the apology. The first graders are learning Spanish. The sixth graders are learning about space. They're creating these awesome posters. So a lot of really, when you think of elementary school, a lot of awesome projects happening as I walk around. we're going to have student council. We have elections coming up in a week and a half, right around election day. So the 4th through 6th graders are running for student council. So that'll be fun. There's an all school bulletin board to connect to our Latino heritage all school read, which is awesome to see. And we actually had our was it a climate committee yesterday, and we talked about keeping that all school bulletin board so that all the grades are kind of collaborating and doing some more cross grade connections. And next week is School Spirit Week, Crazy Hair Day, Pelham colors, dress up. Hopefully not, any crazy Halloween costumes that aren't appropriate for school, but, a way for them to dress up still. I'm really excited about our new intervention teacher or position. And a lot of people have been helping Carol Scotty kind of create that position. She's been working with other intervention teachers in the district, and we've been working with the curriculum director, myself, the special ed teachers, and all the teachers to kind of create that position and really give students intervention in the younger grades. And she actually has been able to work with all the way up to 5th grade. The 6th graders have enough teachers that we are able to do the intervention with the special ed teacher and the para educators. So it was kind of impossible to do all grades. That'd be an impossible job, but we're excited about that. The PTO has been awesome. They've been bringing in treat carts for the teachers, which has really helped the teachers to feel appreciated and boost a little bit of morale. As Mike mentioned, we've got the tent out there with the tables and the ESSER funds, the COVID grant money. We purchased some more tents and some picnic tables so kids have more seating options when they're out eating lunch. We're hoping to bring back the turkey trot. So our school climate committee decided we really should bring that back. So more to come on that. And the trunk or treat is coming up. So that's exciting. I know we had to move the dates, unfortunately, because it was scheduled at the same time as the Pelham town meeting. You live and you learn. And open house was a huge success. We had a big turnout, and the teachers, because of all their work last year online, were very savvy with their PowerPoints, and I got to pop into most classrooms and families. They didn't really have a lot of questions. They just had a lot of comments about how happy their students were and how they love certain aspects of the day. So that was really nice as well. Any questions or comments?
Thanks, Mickey. Go ahead, Ron.
Out of curiosity, who's doing your old job?
So we moved some people around, and that's how we created the intervention teacher. Mm-hmm.
Any other questions for Mickey? Wow. All right. Thank you. It is remarkably smooth, or at least it appears that way. I'm not saying there's not a ton, like that your feet aren't paddling crazy under the water and it's exhausting and stressful, but it is remarkably smooth. So keep it up.
Yeah. I mean, they're kids. They're acting like kids. And if they were all just like sitting there with their feet, we would be worried. So they're doing great.
Great. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Next up, school committee announcements. Anyone? Anything they want to share? Okay. Okay. So we'll go to new and continuing business. The first item here is the FY21 fourth quarter budget.
Yep.
Want me to go over to you, Mike, or Jim?
Yeah, I'll pass it back to Doug. So just for everyone to make sure everyone's on the same page, we'll do the fourth quarter last year, which is how the year ended up, which was a very positive way. And then we'll talk about the first quarter this year. So just the details on that. The quarters start, it ends at the end of the fiscal year, which is June 30th. So the first quarter was July, August, and September. And as Dr. Slaughter will mention when we get to that part of it, those are atypical months because most of our staff aren't here, but it's sort of how do we end up and close out the year last year, and then how did we start the year this year? And so those are the first two items. And with that, I'll pass it over to you, Doug. Thank you.
Thank you. In looking at the fourth quarter, and Mike, are you able to share the report?
Yep, I will do that in momentarily.
Okay. So as he brings that up, I will just say we finished in a very positive status for the end of the fiscal year. I think we had quite a bit of money left over, for lack of a term. It's, in other words, money that we could return to the town of Pelham. As you'll note there in the maybe a little hard to read, but about $208,000 of money under budget. And that's really for a few reasons. And I articulate those in the report a little bit, but I'll emphasize them again. A couple of things. We were very conservative with our spending throughout the year because we just didn't know what kind of expenses we were going to run into as we went through and were dealing with the pandemic. It was in sort of ever evolving, worry about what we might need to be purchasing or what needs we need to accommodate. As a result, we sort of were very cautious with our spending. Additionally, we didn't have a clear picture about what kind of supports we get from the federal government. We got a fairly significant amount of support from the government, but it was evolving over the course of the year. And so, again, we took a fairly cautious approach with our spending so as to not put ourselves in a bind unnecessarily. And then the third thing is that as we came back to in-person schooling, we really didn't know what to expect from the kids and the adults as they came back in the building and what kinds of things we'd need to address. And so, again, we were anticipating some pretty likely scenarios where we might have to spend a fair amount of money. Those didn't materialize in a significant way. And so our overall spending for the year came in quite a bit under what we had budgeted for the year. There were some things we expected. We knew our transportation costs would be a little bit less. We knew our utilities costs would be less. Those kind of things, so those were not surprising. There were some other areas where we were anticipating need and just didn't really realize that. And so we have a fair amount of resources that we can return back to the town for their use, whether with us or with the other town's needs, the other needs of the town in the future. Additionally, the other plus I would mention is that because we had such a significant I don't want to say shortfall, under use of budget, we were able to take a little different approach with our school choice. And this is really, the timing of that is really fortunate for us. We had originally anticipated spending about $280,000 in school choice funds. And as we spoke about this topic, when we were building the budget for fiscal 21, we were concerned about the trajectory of the balance on our school choice funds. And we had a couple of years of lower enrollment of school choice kids. And so the amount of money we were spending from our school choice revenue to support the school versus how much we were taking in was kind of out of balance, and we were worried that we wouldn't be able to sustain that for a long period of time. So by being able to limit our use of school choice in fiscal 21 to just $100,000, we were able to put $182,000 back into our revolving fund. And so what that does is it brings our balance on that school choice up to about $400,000, which is really where we like to keep it. And that allows us to be able to have take on a bad year and support ourselves and not be too worried about it. So that was a really, really positive outcome for us. And so I think the other things that, I could go into are not as detailed, or not as interesting as far as their detail, but nonetheless, that was a pretty positive outcome for our year. So we were able to get our school choice back to a balance. We really will be able to sustain ourselves for a longer period of time. So I think I'll stop there as far as fourth quarter and sort of see if anyone has any questions relative to what was in the report or things I just mentioned.
Thank you, Doug. Mike, would you mind not sharing anymore? Thank you. All right. Yeah, Margaret and then Ron.
You said we returned money to the town. I'm sorry, but I missed the amount that you said we were able to return
It's going to be about $208,000.
back to the town.
Yeah, so of the amount of budget we had expected to spend, we were under budget by about 10%. So it was a pretty significant return. If we had used more school choice, which would have been, a negative effect on our school choice balance, it would have been a larger number. So that was a kind of trade-off of we should use some school choice to support the school budget, but yes, we had the opportunity to use less than we had originally planned. So it was
Okay.
fortunate.
Thank you.
Mike, and then Ron, I haven't forgotten about you. Go ahead, Mike.
Yep, and I just want to add to Dr. Slaughter's point, which is just appreciation for members in the town and the finance committee of Pelham who, given this, we usually, and those who've been on the committee a while, we went to them when things weren't good, and they've supported us for large sums of money, with charter school expenses that were unanticipated, that were, close to $100,000, and they found a way mid-fiscal year to do that. So, it does feel good to be supporting the town when this unusual situation has arisen. I think it's also worth noting that the town easily, and this would happen in many towns, just say, no, just this was your budget, and anything that, was an overage, we'll take. And the town recognized the benefit of increasing the school choice account and relieving some of the pressure that's been on the school because of the challenges with that account. So I just want to share my appreciation for John Trickey and the town for working collaboratively with us yet again.
Yes, agree. Thank you. Ron, go ahead.
You should have had a brass fanfare with those two announcements. That's fantastic. That's 10% of the school budget was returned, plus the school choice. We've been worried about the school choice for 3 years disappearing. That's apparently it's stabilized. You could call the meeting off now and declare victory. And thank you very much for the good news.
I will say I can't promise it'll always be this good.
Oh, of course not.
But I hope to, but I can't always. I mean, the other thing is that I think that, in years when we have kids in our buildings more often, or all year, it'll be a lot harder to be that far under budget. But nonetheless, we were, like I said, fairly conservative in our approach just because we weren't sure what we were going to get. It was, it was and has been and continues to be a bit of a wild card how the pandemic plays out. So we're trying to be conscientious about how we use our resources to make sure we meet the needs of the kids.
Is there any background on why the school choice was so underspent? I mean,
well, we had budgeted for, we had anticipated the need for, a little over $280,000 worth of use. And at the end of the year, we sort of, as we're squaring up the books, we sort of look at the use of that funding, and we were in a circumstance where we didn't need to leverage that to the extent we expected to, and so we were just able to use less than we had. I will say, and this is sort of a prelude into quarter one, but just from an enrollment standpoint, last time I looked, we had been running in the low 40s for a number of school choice students, and I believe this year we've boosted back to about 50, which is kind of the target number that we're looking for to sort of sustain the revenue that we need and the sort of support for the school we need. So I think just as an auxiliary piece of information, the enrollment of school choice kids has gone back up to a level that's more sustainable for us. So I think that's also another piece of good news around our sort of financial future.
well, thanks again for the great news.
Any questions for Doug? Yes. Well, yes. Thanks, Doug. Then I guess I'm a little more cynical than Ron. I think that, I think the reason that you have been so cautious is that we know that it's like one small thing can really shift things dramatically in one direction or the other. And it's great that now we're in the good direction. So I do appreciate the caution that you took, because I think we've learned from the past that it really is so important. So I appreciate that diligence there. Okay, do you want to move on to FY22?
Absolutely. So first quarter's been tracking as we would hope it would, and so the expenses, some of them are a little interesting to look at, like the superintendent mentioned, July and August, we don't have a lot of people on the payroll. So that really only represents, the month of September when everybody's back and on the payroll. So that fact that our payroll is only at 10% is actually what we hope it would be, is to be about that percentage. As we play through the year, it will track more to the expected levels. But we don't have and haven't had a ton of turnover in Pelham in our staff, and so that helps our projections and our budgeting to match up. And so I think the one thing I will note there is that our substitutes are fairly low at this point in the year. We're taking a fairly cautious approach to how many extra people we bring into our buildings, and also just generally in the first month of school, there's not a lot of absenteeism by any staff. So that's also, it's tracking as expected, and hopefully it'll remain that way, and folks will remain healthy, and we won't need to use our substitute lines too much as we go through the year, and that'll help us out in other areas of our budget. As we look at the other expense accounts, there's really two areas that sort of caught my eye: administrative services and facilities management. They often tend to be tracking ahead of schedule because there's some full year expenses we sort of book at the beginning of the year. Software subscriptions. We encumber funds for certain kinds of activities in maintenance of facilities that we use throughout the year. So we anticipate the need and sort of secure the monies early, so it looks like we're spending ahead of schedule. But there were a couple of bills in those two areas that were a little higher than we expect. So we'll keep a close eye on those. I'm not really worried about it. I don't want to cause anybody to have any deep concern or panic relative to those yellow boxes on the chart there. But I just wanted to note, to be clear, that there are a couple expenses that have come in a little higher than what we had planned for, and so that we are just going to keep a close eye on that and look at other areas that might be coming in under budget to help offset that a little bit. But in general, the budget's tracking very well for the first quarter. We're anticipating it's going to continue to track well at present. And one thing that always helps your budget is this other bit of good news I have. I'm full of good news. I don't know that I'll always be able to do that, but there is a grant program with the state called Rural School Aid, and Pelham tends to sit kind of on either side of the non-award line. So some years we get it, some years we don't. It turns out that this year we did get it, and so we were notified recently of about $6,800 worth of additional aid from the state that's going to come to us for use in our school, and that's really a helpful bit of income that allows for some supportive things that we might not be able to do otherwise, or unexpected things that might crop up that we need to take care of in our budget. And so that was a bit of good news I want to make sure to share. It's not in this quarter one report, but I did want to mention that bit of good news has come along. And like I said, the state doesn't always fund that program at a level that Pelham qualifies. We tend to sit on the bubble, as they say, and so some years we get it and some years we don't. So we don't tend to budget for it as a result of that. So it's kind of found money, and that's a helpful thing in any budget to have that resource show up and be available for us. I think at this point, like I said, we're tracking well for the first quarter. No real surprises there. A couple of areas I'm going to keep a close eye on as we move through the second quarter, and I'm happy to answer any questions you all have.
All right. Thanks, Doug. Well, I want you to embrace this feeling you have giving this news. You're super understated about it, but we're all smiling. So just remember this.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Any questions, comments for Doug? No? Okay, great. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you all.
Okay, next up is the 6th grade move to the middle school update. Hi, go ahead.
Sure. So I think there's two things to share and one continued consistent recommendation that I'd make. And Doug, you're welcome to stay on, but you're also welcome to not, if that works for you. The Amherst School Committee at the beginning of this month voted unanimously to have their 6th grade students move to the middle school pending a vote by the regional school committee in the fall of 2023. So not for the next school year, but the school year after that. The regional school committee had a discussion about this at their last meeting. It'll be on the agenda for a potential vote next week. The vote language that was drafted, not voted, I want to be really clear, but the vote language was drafted was not specific to Amherst, but was asking the region if they would accept sixth grade students from any member town that chose to send them. That doesn't push anybody to do anything. I'll be at the Leverett School Committee next week and having the same conversation and frankly having the same recommendation, even though it's not my school committee, but they're asking me to come, which is the small towns have very different incentives or disincentives about moving sixth grade. In Amherst, 2 of the 3 critical variables don't apply. In Pelham, those were a real acute space need. I was on the phone with a couple principals this afternoon about the space needs in Amherst, and we don't have space for things like instrumental music. We don't have space or insufficient space, looking at special education needs. That's not the case in Pelham. Frankly, particularly with the additional space that's now used by art, space needs aren't a concern, for Pelham. The other consideration in Amherst is that there is a building project. There was some work done over the last 3 years about a compromise proposal that would have taken care of 2 of the buildings that are out of date in Amherst. All that's contingent on sixth grade moving to the middle school for that plan to move forward with the state, with the MSBA. That doesn't apply to Pelham. So my personal perspective is for Pelham folks, there's not the same incentive to move sixth grade to the middle school. We could have a long conversation. We probably should at some point about the merits of that, larger discussion about sixth grade and about small school, and if kids are in the same class for 6 years or 7 years, are they ready for different experiences? I think there's a worthwhile conversation to have. To me, I don't think there's any timeline that the committee, in my opinion, the committee needs to push that. I do think that we're getting out of the extent that we were in COVID last year. I don't think COVID's gone, but it's a different world we're in. And, within a month, I think the kids in Pelham, with the exception of the kindergartners, and including the kindergartners, would potentially have access to a vaccine. So I think things are changing and we are recovering. And I think our staff's doing a great job of kind of both academic and then kind of well-being and social emotional recovery that we're focused on students. To me, there's not the incentive or need to really push this conversation during this academic year, particularly as the plans that was voted by Amherst aren't even happening for another year and a half. So my recommendation to this committee is for me, ask me to stay abreast, and certainly Sarah Bess and Margaret can help with that. But, as I'm on both the Amherst and the regional committee, I probably am the best person to give updates to the Pelham committee, maybe in the kind of category of superintendent updates. Unless there's a desire for this committee to push the issue, it's not an issue that I would recommend pushing. At this point, I think there's plenty of time to see what program is developed for sixth grade in the regional schools. And I would actually argue that there's plenty of time, even after that Amherst, if the region votes to accept Amherst sixth grade students, even after that happens, for Pelham to consider it. It doesn't have to be on the same timeline. And perhaps with my Pelham superintendent hat on, it gets a little confusing when I'm going back and forth in these 3 meetings. I might advocate or recommend advocating for your regional reps to make sure that the on-ramp, if Pelham was to decide, it might be beneficial for some language and emotion to not preclude Pelham sixth grade students from joining at a later date. In other words, if the fall 2023 date isn't going to work for Pelham, fall 2025, a Pelham school committee might make a different choice, and preserving that option for the region to preserve that option for Pelham to join later might be a good idea. But I think at this point, I don't see any reason to push this. I don't see any reason for Pelham to unless the committee feels really strongly about it, and I've not heard that from the committee, strong desire to send sixth grade to the middle school. I'd rather focus on other things, well, it's our time and the school's time on other things as opposed to that point. I think I could argue the opposite. I could talk a lot about sixth grade in the middle school, how common that is, and the idea of a 2-year middle school and some challenges that we continually experience there. I just don't know that this is a time to really be pushing that. I think you have the luxury, I mean that word literally, the luxury of waiting and seeing without a real external need or space facilities need to make a decision on this. So I would use the privilege you have of not needing to go quicker than you want to, and perhaps re-engaging this topic more fully next fall. Sorry, that was long-winded, but taking a lot of my time. So I'm really focused on this particular topic. But certainly the committee could disagree with me. We certainly can continue to engage and go down that road. I've talked to Principal Darling about this. I think we're in the same place that, I think the things we're focusing on in Pelham right now are the things that we should be focusing on in Pelham right now. And I think there'll be a time where a program of studies is developed that I think is the right time for Pelham folks to be able to consider it. So I'll stop talking and see if there's comments or questions. And if I'm misreading the committee, please tell me I'm misreading the committee, right? Please tell me no, we really want to push this 6th grade point. And I'm actually really happy to talk about that. For Pelham with that superintendent hat on, I'm not sure now's the time.
Okay. Sarah Best and then Ron.
So a couple of things. I love the idea of you keeping us up to date in the superintendent's report. I think that would be a great way for us to keep paying attention to what's going on in Amherst. I think that would be really helpful. I also like your idea of having some language at the regional level to make sure that if Pelham is interested at a future date, that is something that's already built in to the system. And I agree. I think at this time, I don't think this is something that Pelham needs to focus time and energy on at this point. I think the staff at Pelham has been doing a great job helping the kids get back into their new kind of normal and routines in our post-COVID or whatever this is. It's not really post-COVID, still COVID, but less have to be stuck at home COVID, I guess. I don't know. So I think Pelham staff is doing a fantastic job, and we should give them the space and time to do that. I think that's in the best interest of our kids. So yeah, that's where I'm at this point anyway.
Thanks, Sarah Best. Ron.
I certainly don't want the committee to make a vote one way or the other right now. For the last 3 years, I've continued to say, what do the parents think? Should we encourage the parent? It's on their minds. They read the newspaper. People are talking about the moves to the 6th grade to the middle school. Now is the time to gather a public opinion. Maybe we should encourage parents to send emails in the public comment section. Maybe we should schedule some type of open forum the way we did for the change in the sex education classes. Now it's on people's minds now. Why not create some kind of mechanism for finding out what parents think? I mean, I think it's clear. I've expressed my doubts, and they're mainly around safety. I don't think you should put a 12-year-old on the same school bus as an 18-year-old. It's an invitation for mayhem. Perhaps bullying has disappeared from the school bus, but I remember it did exist when I was back then. I don't know, somehow we should gather information now from the parents. If the parents want it, I have no kid in the school now. If the parents are favor it, well, I'm voting in favor of it. But I don't know whether the parents favor it. But we can't find out unless we ask them. That's my position.
Okay, thank you, Ron. Brenda.
I also agree that, it makes sense for us to wait, considering that we have the advantage to do so. I think it's really critical that we get parent feedback, but I would caution that we want to make sure that we're really clear about the benefits of the academic program and also maybe the financial ramifications of doing that before we just let them jump in and give their feedback now. But I do agree with Ron that we have heard for some families that they think we're voting soon, or they think that because of all the conversations Amherst was happening, we're on the same timeline. And I think it'd be important to make it clear to folks that we're not on the same timeline. Also, I think it's critical that we do try to allow them space to give their feedback before it's too late to join Amherst for fall of 2023, in case there are lots of families who are really pro moving the 6th grade to the middle school. I don't know, that's a kind of a delicate timeline, trying to get the sweet spot of getting their feedback while they have enough information to give that kind of feedback.
Right. Thank you. Margaret, go ahead.
A couple of comments along the lines of what you just said, Brenda. Perhaps the timeline will become evident as we continue to get updates from Mike. You know, that as things develop in Amherst, it will become obvious maybe when we want to have a discussion in Pelham. The other thing, as one of the regional reps from Pelham, one of the questions that seems to come up, because people are reading and they think that as a regional rep, I am voting to move the 6th grade in Pelham to the middle school. That is not the case. And we had this discussion at the region because it's a little bit confusing when you're a regional rep about where's your hat. And really where the discussion led us is that as part of the region, what we have to decide is it beneficial for the 7th and 8th graders at the middle school to have the 6th graders move to the middle school? Has nothing to do with the 6th graders and the advantages or disadvantages for them. We're simply voting for the region. Should we bring the 6th graders into the region? And I think that's really, it was confusing for me. And I think it's been confusing for people in Pelham when they're reading in the newspaper. So that was helpful for me, the discussion we had.
Thanks, Margaret. Ron.
I haven't been zooming in on the regional meetings. Margaret, say that before your vote at the regional school committee meeting. Let the public know why you're doing it.
Oh, I will be voting as a region member, not as a Pelham member.
But say that at the meeting.
Sure. Oh, I see. So that if people from Pelham are listening then.
Yes.
Sure. Absolutely.
Mike, go ahead.
I wonder if whether it's Chair Hall and I, or maybe Ms. Dancer and I, or some combination, can put something in with Ms. Darling's permission in the kind of Pelham Press, just clarifying some of these points. Because I think what the common thread I heard from all the committee members who have commented to date is just around communication. I'm using my words. I didn't hear that explicitly, that word explicitly, but just that the Pelham community knows, the kind of the core things they need to know are A, at this point, Pelham 6th grade students, there are no direct plans for Pelham 6th grade students to move. B, that we will come back to that point next fall. And if people have opinions on that, they can share them by emailing schoolcommittee@arps.org, or here's how they do public comment. And C, we are aware of conversations going on in the, other communities. But that, the last point that Margaret was just making with Mr. Menino, that the Pelham reps in the region are making a decision only about the region. That decision doesn't have an impact on Pelham 6th grade students. So it seemed like the 3 points that need to be clarified. And I just wonder if again, with the permission of Ms. Darling, if we put something in the Pelham Press, that way it gives people an opportunity to weigh in if they choose to weigh in, as Mr. Menino indicated. It lets them know a timeline of when, as a committee, I think we'll come back to this point, topic more definitively, and also lets them know that the regional members aren't voting on Pelham 6th grade, because I think you're right that there's going to be a point of confusion. So I don't know if that would sort of accomplish what I think I'm hearing from the committee in terms of communication and making sure everyone in the Pelham school community is aware of what is happening and what's not happening. Because I agree with a lot of the comments that are implying that there's some confusion, because I think that it's a confusing situation, right? The 3 districts thing, there's times where it works really smoothly, and then there's times where it's messy, and this is a mucky one, I didn't want to, and I didn't mean to volunteer you for that, Sarah, but I just wondered if there was some communication that could go out. And I'm happy to work on it, but I think because it's a committee decision, it might be good to come from the committee.
Right. No, I mean, I didn't feel volunteered. That was actually going to be one of my comments. I have been getting emails from people in some cases with opinions on it, wanting to share those, and in other cases, just curious. I would say the category of most people is someone with a kid in like grade 4 or below, and they're just like looking ahead, just curious because they saw something in the Gazette. So for sure, I think communicating widely to the school community is a great idea. I think probably Mickey's newsletter has the best list of people for that. So I'm not entirely sure how I feel. I'm just gonna throw this out there, like, seeing Doug's presentation tonight and how long our meetings have been, and talking about like we're at this place where things are kind of at a low roar, and we don't have a controversial issue right now. We don't have anything that's taking a ton of time. I'm not entirely convinced that the wait and see approach is best. Because assuming that the region votes to accept 6th graders, then it's happening, right? So the program is going to be like, what are the mechanics? What are the details? I can't imagine that there's going to be like that a district would suddenly back out because there's like, oh, they decided not to teach math to 6th graders, right? Like, it will, I don't know. I could be convinced to start talking about it now. I think also people want to know. There's been so much uncertainty in the lives of students and teachers and their parents. I think the idea of having certainty about fall 2023 sooner rather than later might provide some level of comfort and just kind of knowing what to picture. I could be talked out of that. I think I don't know. We never know what's going to come up. And so to take advantage of times when like the budget is looking pretty good and there's nothing really big going on, I'm just throwing that out there. Ron.
I agree. The sooner the better a discussion takes place, the better off we'll all be.
Margaret.
I guess I just have a question, because right now we really know nothing about the academic program, the rental, what kind of financial agreement has to be made to rent the middle school space. There's so much that's unknown, I guess, is why I think maybe it would be better to wait a little while, because we don't really have a lot to say to them at this point in time. I guess that's how I feel.
Thank you, Margaret. Sarah Bess and then Ron.
I think kind of piggybacking on what Margaret just said. So if Amherst moves their 6th graders, they're not part of the region. They're still part of Amherst. So what happens then if, say, Pelham 6th graders go also to the middle school? Then how does that work? Is there a separate Pelham classroom that only keeps Pelham kids in it? So then they're still part of the Pelham school district? Or are the Amherst and Pelham kids commingled together? Because there's different programming, right, between the different schools. And how does that work? Does Pelham just get usurped because there are more Amherst kids, and then we don't know, then they're just part of that curriculum? Like, I have concern for our Pelham students. We've developed some great programs at Pelham, and being able to continue to have them benefit from those. And there's just, I guess I don't understand how it will work if the sixth graders are not part of the region, they're still part of their sending districts. Like whatever, the money I think will be the easier part to figure out, right? Like you have these many kids, this is how many kids it's whatever. But as far as the educational practices, how is that gonna how will that work out?
Mike, go ahead.
I don't have a clean and easy answer, but I do think that's probably, my personal opinion is that's probably a topic that is worth talking about this year. Worth is not the right word. I apologize for that. I think that's a topic we can talk about, and we don't need more information than what we have now, because I think there's a number of different ways that one could approach that topic that you described, Sarah, best. Like, that's not something that I think we need to wait for more programming information. That's a core principle about, does the Pelham School District want to work with the Amherst School District on a sixth grade program? If so, how would that be organized? I think if Pelham sixth grade programming was literally moving, I'm just going to use names because we're in Pelham, like Margaret's class to the middle school, there's not a lot of upside to that, right? I would argue probably there's almost no upside to literally taking this classroom and moving it to a different space. I think really the interesting part, and perhaps the part that is worth talking about in terms of weighing cost benefits, or positives, negatives, however you want to phrase it, is really integrating into a larger group of students with a larger set of programming. So even if we don't know what the programming is, I do think from a process perspective, the point Ms. Kenny makes is probably one that we could and probably should have that conversation in the front end, even if we don't exactly know what the programming is, because we have a general sense good enough where we could, that's going to be the biggest delta, right? Is not in a one teacher, one classroom model, but a model where kids have different teachers for different subjects and that sort of thing. And I'm not trying to weigh positive or negative, but that's a core principle change that probably is worth having discussion. I think it gets to Ms. Hall's point of not waiting too long while we do have space. That's a foundational question for Pelham sixth grade that doesn't exist in Amherst, right? What that model is looks different, but they're already changing classes in Amherst sixth grade in the elementary level, right? That's already a practice that's in place right now. That's not true in Pelham. So I think, my personal opinion is I think that's a good topic to dig in on this year, because I think it would really probably be one of multiple forks in the road for you all in your consideration.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. Ron.
I agree with Margaret. There are details we can't share with the parents now, but there'll always be details. And there's no reason why we can't talk to parents now and talk to them later. This can be a continuous process, and give them, let's say, 6-month updates on our plan. I always assumed that the sixth grade was going to be integrated with all the other sixth grade students. If we're just going to move the Ms. Light's classroom to the middle school, that's educationally unsound as far as I'm concerned. There are a lot of things that parents care about. If you asked me in 1997, when there was talk about this in 1997. I didn't want my daughter to go to the big school down the hill. I wanted her to stay in the safety and comfort of a small school up the hill. My daughter disagreed with me. She wanted to have the sixth grade at the middle school. Well, for safety reasons, I said no. And that's an opinion I'd like to hear from most parents, whether they're comfortable with I like the Pelham School. I volunteered at the Pelham School for 10 years. It's a family. It's cozy. It's comfortable. And I'd hate to lose that. And I don't know how many other parents agree with me. Maybe they don't care. But I'd like to know what they think. I'm a one-note person on this for 3 years. But that's my opinion.
Thanks, Ron. Margaret, go ahead, Margaret.
Yeah, I guess I would just say that Mike made a very convincing statement about what would be good to do this year, and I would agree with that.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I think having this conversation, I guess maybe what I don't love is the idea of deciding to wait until next fall. Maybe taking a little bit more of an incremental approach of like, well, here's this one kind of fundamental question that we can discuss now, and bringing that up as relevant in meetings. And then maybe as we get updates, if there are specific elements that we learn that it's like, oh, well, this is something that we should either make sure that we communicate to folks, or this is something that we should definitely discuss now because this will inform these other things. I mean, I don't want to nickel and dime this issue to death and be talking about it for hours at every single meeting. But I think sort of having this pause and being like, all right, we'll talk about it in September might also be a little too far on the other end. Mickey, go ahead.
I just want to say one thing. I think whenever we decide to talk about it, I think it'd be really great just because of the uncertainty of COVID and kids and stress and anxiety to have the 5th grade parents tell their 5th graders that it's not going to happen next year. Like, I just think that message should somehow get out as well, just because they're probably hearing about it.
Sure. Yeah, I think that's a great point. Thank you. Yeah, Mike, go ahead.
Yeah, I think maybe if we come back to the communication piece, because I think this has been really helpful conversation for me. I do wonder, I'm going to kind of limit my number of things, but maybe the thing to share with the community is, to Ms. Darling's point, that there's no consideration of moving 6th grade for next year, just because there is none. I don't hear any interest in the community. In this committee, and I actually don't think the region would accept that regardless. I don't want to speak for that committee, but I think there's been no interest in pushing that timeline quicker at the regional level. I haven't heard any dialogue on that. So I think answering that one and communicating that, to your point, Mickey, I think makes a lot of sense. And I think just letting them know that, this is going to be, no decision will be made very soon, but if people have feedback, leaving them those avenues of schoolcommittee@arps.org or public comment, maybe that's a simple enough message, to give, is that there's no consideration of moving 6th grade next year. Conversation will happen. No decision will be made even for the future year in the next month or two. But if people do have comments they'd like to make, they can give them that pathway. I don't know how people feel about that kind of simple communication. I don't think it's controversial. I think it's factual. Would that be something that the committee is comfortable with?
Yes, for sure. Yeah. Yeah, and I think too, just that, this question of 5th grade too, and I know in some of the public comment that we got that was sort of sent to all the committees wasn't really relevant to Pelham. There was some concern about like, oh, you're going to tell 5th graders that year, like, surprise, this is your last year at the school. I don't know. To me, that's another reason I think to like know as far ahead of time as is possible. If that is, I don't know. I just think having that certainty would help everyone, teachers, other parents, kids, stakeholders generally. Okay, so next steps then, sort of a factual communication to the school community so that everyone's aware of what, next year will be status quo. And then taking up these kind of fundamental questions that we can discuss locally. And then the rest of it will be like, as we learn more, we can re-engage in this question as it makes sense. Does that feel right to folks? Okay. All right. Anything else on grade 6 after this vigorous debate? No. Okay, great. Thank you, everyone. Okay, next up is superintendent goals. The attachment is in the agenda.
Yep, I will try to see if I can bring that up.
Oh, okay, thank you.
Yep, there we go. And this is a draft. I'll bring it back next month for a vote based on any feedback I receive. You can see that there's 4 goals. I'm not going to go through every bulleted point, but just continue the progress on DEI, on diversity, equity, inclusion, Some of these goals are consistent across all districts, which was the intent and the feedback I received from multiple committees. The second is really thinking through, and Mickey spoke a bit about this, we're in academic year 3 of the pandemic, and just trying to think through collaborating with the public health folks on health and safety measures. At some point in the future, I don't think it'll be next month, but I imagine that at some point we're going to be talking about relaxing some of the measures we have. I think probably at some point during this academic year, we're going to have some of those conversations. And so it's going to be really critically important that we continue to be having those conversations in public. Mickey mentioned the COVID relief funds, and that we are still, fine tuning the start time. And, while that's a regional issue in theory, it's had an impact on the elementary schools. So when we get to the winter and early spring, we want to survey all families and all students and all staff members about how they're experiencing any changes, because Pelham is different, right? It's starting earlier, it's ending earlier, has functional changes in terms of when staff members meet with each other and when faculty meeting is, and a whole range of factors that we want to solicit feedback on. The third goal is around budget planning and communication. And so while we are feeling great with Dr. Slaughter's reports tonight, we're still going to have a budget year, and we're still going to have to make some difficult decisions, hopefully less difficult than in the past, but who knows about the budget. And that never ceases to be, or it's never unimportant, I think, in Pelham. And the last one is the curriculum instruction one. The two areas are that we have a new dyslexia screener and process that's via state regulation that we're implementing. And we're also looking at the elementary math program. So this is something that actually we've gotten some comments about over the years, some I think declining satisfaction with everyday math, which is our current math program, and from Pelham staff as well, not just Pelham families. And so we are looking to complete a curricular review of that, and starting that actually in the near future, in terms of at least setting up the process where we'll get feedback from staff and families, look at what's out there. It's been a long time that we've been with everyday math, and there's new products out there for consideration. So those are the standards that, I didn't include the standard for the last goal. I apologize. I'm looking for the next page, but it doesn't exist. So I can add that when we get to the final version of this document. But I wanted to gather any feedback from the committee before I draft the final version.
All right. Thank you. Questions, edits, comments for Mike on his goals? Mike, could you stop sharing? Thank you. Bless you, Sarah Bess. Anything? Okay. Oh, Ron, go ahead.
It seems that life goes in circles. I remember when everyday math was introduced. So this is called continuous improvement, I guess.
If I could comment a bit on that, I think we are trying to be more systemic about reviewing our curricula on a routine basis and trying to have a cycle for that. I think everyday math, I think it's likely that we will be recommending a change to that, but that's not a foregone conclusion. But we haven't taken a deep look at everyday math in a couple of years. And for us, it's just, we're hearing some level of concerns, particularly as the curriculum spirals, and we're coming out of a pandemic, that, the people are struggling with the nature of a spiraling math curriculum. Some people do really like it. Spiraling just means that you don't stay with the same topic all the time. It means that it's intended to be cumulative, so that you may have a topic for a certain amount of time, but you're then going back to prior topics. So I understand the philosophy, but I think people are struggling with a less linear, I think, fair to say, curriculum. I think it was much better than what we had before. So I'm not at all saying it was the wrong choice. I think it's just things evolve and new products come out and new curricula come out. And at this point, when we, bought into everyday math, it was, one of the 2 or 3 preeminent math curricula in the country. That's no longer the case. I had a conversation with someone actually used to work at the district, but he's a math lead now at the department, and he works with multiple districts, and he's going to be supporting us, who are going through curriculum review processes. And it was interesting here, and he was part of the adoption here of everyday math, which was kind of fascinating to talk to him about. And at this point, I'm not saying it's good, bad, no judgment about it, but it's not one of the 3 or 4 curricula that districts similar to ours are moving towards. And I think we're learning more. It's served a good purpose, and it's, I think, just time for review. So we are trying to be more systemic and more deliberate about looking at our curricula on a routine basis and seeing, is it working for our students? We did definitely saw a jump in our performance when we made that transition. And it's, I think our performance is consistent now, but it's not necessarily going up. And that's what we want for our students. So I think it's worthwhile to take the time and put the resources in for it.
Yep, Ron, go ahead.
This may not be appropriate comment now, but it reminded me of a newspaper article in the last couple of months where it said that the MCAS scores went up during COVID. Was that, do I recollect that correctly?
Yeah, that wasn't true for Pelham. So we were very consistent with the state average, which saw a modest decline in performance, as would be predicted given the year we had last year. So some of the other districts I work for had more atypical results. I would also caution, as I did at some of my other committee meetings, that we had a lot of students choose not to take the test last year. So
okay,
I think the reliability of those results is questionable.
Yeah.
Anything else on goals? Okay. Warrant reports. Okay, this is me. Okay, I've got 4 tonight. I authorized by my signature to payables in the amount of $40,132.71 for the warrant dated September 15th, 2021. That included general fund expenses of $37,586.25, revolving fund expenses of $306.05, grant fund expenses of $2,180.41, and $60 in gifts. And I signed that on the 15th of September. I authorized by my signature payroll in the amount of $62,187.02. That was for a warrant dated September 22nd, and I signed that on September 17th. I authorized by my signature to payables in the amount of $43,412.66 for the warrant dated October 5th, 2021. That included general fund expenses of $37,907.28, revolving fund expenses of $143.46, and grant fund expenses of $5,244.26, and other fund expenses of $117.66. Oh, sorry, that was gifts. That 117 was gifts. I signed that on October 7th. Last one, I authorized payroll in the amount of $64,770 on October 19th, 2021. Did you catch all that? Yes. Good job. Okay. That was all the warrants. We don't have any gifts to accept.
It's true.
Mike,
I just wanted to briefly call, because I don't think it's breaking up meeting law. So I have a conflict on the 3rd starting at 8 o'clock, which is our next meeting was scheduled for November 3rd. So I could either meet on November 2nd, which is election night, but I don't think there's a huge election in Pelham that I'm aware of. Or I could meet on the 3rd, but at about 7:45, 7:50, I would probably have to depart the meeting. So I don't know what works better for the committee members, but I just received this conflict just came up last night, and it's not something that I can change.
Sure. Did we schedule that because the other Wednesdays were not good? That just seems, or maybe this one is just late. It's just that that's so soon from now. Can we push it to later in November?
Yep. I don't have any conflicts any other Wednesday in November.
Okay.
I mean, I wouldn't do it the night before Thanksgiving because it's probably not, not kosher with.
Do like a theme thing. We could make it fun.
I'm going nowhere, so it'd be fine with me actually. But yeah, we could certainly do it later in November.
November 10th? Is that okay? That would be my preference then. Okay.
Thank you.
All right.
Sorry about that.
No, that's okay. All right. I move to adjourn the Pelham School Committee meeting. Is there a second?
Second.
All right. I will take a roll call vote. Ron,
Menino, I.
Sarah Best,
Sarah Best, aye.
Brenda,
Brenda, I.
Margaret,
Margaret, I.
and Hall, I. We are adjourned. Thank you, everyone. Have a good night.
Good night, everyone.
Good
Take
night.
care.
Bye.